Today on our 2011 Chevrolet Traverse, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Rear View Safety G-Series backup camera, part number RVS-776718-DOS. So here's what our backup camera system looks like. It's going to replace our factory mirror, and we're going to have a built-in color digital display. Now the mirror not only is going to look a lot like our factory mirror, but it's also going to have a lot of the same features. It has an auto dimming feature, so when we're driving at night, drivers behind us won't blind us. Also, it has built-in OnStar capability. Now we're really going to benefit from our camera is when we're backing up. Since we don't want to run into a pedestrian, our backup camera is going to keep everyone safe. Now our camera is only going to come on when we put it in reverse. So when we're driving, it'll look like this, or when it's in park. But when I put it into reverse, the monitor will come on and we'll be able to see what's behind us. Now our camera is going to give us some guidelines so that we have a general idea of how close things are. It's also going to feature a remote, that way we can cycle through all our settings and fine tune anything that we may want to. The camera in our system, we just chose to mount it to the back of our bumper. Now you can mount this anywhere, and it does have adjustability so you can get that perfect angle of viewing that you may need. Now the camera is weatherproof, so it will stand up to the elements being at the back of our bumper here, and it does have built-in night vision to help us be safe when backing up, even in dark conditions. Now that we've gone over some of the features, let's show you how we get the camera installed. To begin our installation, we're going to need to remove our rear view mirror because our monitor is going to be replacing it. Now, if we come to the base of our mirror, we're going to see that there's a fastener or a set screw. Now that's going to be a T20 Torx bit, and in our kit they do provide us an Allen key with a Torx bit on the end to tighten up our new mirror, but it will fit our old factory mirror as well. We're going to loosen it up enough until we can slide it off. Now once we have the screw removed, we're going to come and pay attention to our harness that's coming to the back of our mirror. Now there's going to be a button right here, so we're going to push in on that button. If we push in on that button, it'll release it and we can pull it out. Now with that removed, we can go to the very top. If we squeeze in on either side, we can slide that cover down and slide it out of the way. And we can take our mirror and slide it upwards and it'll come right off. Now on our new mirror, that's going to be our monitor. As I mentioned, we're going to have another set screw. Now we're going to want to make sure that's nice and loose. You don't want it to be falling out, but you want it to be nice and loose so you can slide it over the button on your windshield. Now we can take our mount and making sure it's facing the right way, we're going to go over the button on the windshield and we're going to slide it into place. And you want to make sure that the tabs grab it and it slides all the way into place. Give it a gentle tug to make sure it's in position, and then we can go ahead and tighten up that set screw again. Now you don't want to go super crazy tightening it, you just want it nice and snug so the mirror's not going to come off. Now the harness we unplugged from our mirror, that's going to be for our OnStar. Now our new mirror does come with OnStar capability, and we're going to match up the plugs and we can plug it in. You want to make sure it locks into place. Our OnStar wiring I'm going to leave out and loose right now just so we can get the rest of everything in place. Now the other end is going to be for our camera cable, and we're going to start routing this towards the edge of our headliner here, towards the driver's side. So we're just going to tuck it up underneath the headliner and start working towards the edge of the driver's side. And you want to leave this end exposed just so we can get the other end attached. Now the harness that we're going to be attaching to our monitor is going to have the same end on it as the monitor itself. But on the other end, we're going to have a few wires and what look like RCA cables. Now the reason why I'm bringing this up is because the camera cable on the camera itself is very similar, but the number of pins aren't the same, and you don't want to try to plug it in and bend any of these pins. So we can take our monitor cable, and there's going to be a line with an arrow, and it's going to match up with the line and arrow on our harness. Now we're going to plug that in, and I'm going to put a little bit of electrical tape just to help keep the connection there. Now we're going to start routing this wire again along the headliner, tucking it up underneath. And then also we're going to start running down the pillar, and we're going to go as far down to the bottom of our dash as we can. And when you get over to the door, where your weather stripping is. It'd be a little bit easier if you just pull the weather stripping away, and that way you can just run it behind this panel here. And once we get to the section where it's on the side of our dash here, I'm actually going to take this panel loose. So if we just reach behind it, we gently pull away, and it'll pop out the clips. And then we can take the rest of our harness and start routing it down through the plastic right here so we can come out underneath our dash. And we can pull our panel away, and we can route the wires underneath the dash. To help keep my wire underneath the panel and in between the weather stripping, I'm going to go ahead and put the weather stripping back, making sure that the wire is in the correct spot. The rest of the length of my harness, I'm going to leave right here for now, and we're going to get ready to mount the camera. We're going to be mounting our camera right underneath this shelf area, right above our license plate right here. Now we are going to need to get our wire from the outside to the inside to meet up with our monitor, but we'll worry about that after we mount the camera. Now the mounting plate on our camera, it does come with a gasket, and we're going to go ahead and take the protective coating off. And the sticky side is going to go onto the bracket itself, giving it a little bit of extra cushion. To make things a little bit easier, I'm going to go ahead and remove my license plate so I can have more access to the plastic. Now our camera is going to mount using some screws that are provided, and we're going to take the flat washers that are also provided in the kit. And this is how we're going to be mounting them. Just so you get an idea, we're going to be using the screw in conjunction with the flat washer going through the bracket on our camera. Now fortunately, our camera doesn't have holes, it has slots, so we can actually just start screwing one screw in, and then we can slide it over, making it a little bit easier to handle. Now with the one screw in place, we can push our camera over, line up our new screw in the slot, and start drilling it into place. I want to mention, if you look at the camera, we're going to have a screw that it's going to pivot on. You want to make sure that that screw is on the top side of the camera. That way we can adjust the camera in the proper angle and the picture will be right side up. Now, in order for us to get our wire through the back, we're going to have to drill a hole here in the plastic. Now, fortunately, they do provide us with a grommet, so I'm going to be drilling a hole that's going to be roughly 7/8 an inch, but I'm going to be starting out with a small drill bit for a pilot hole. Now I'm going to come back with the step drill bit and drill it out to the final size. We're going to take the end of our camera cable and we're going to pass it through. We're going to push as much of the wire as we can through. And we're going to take our grommet and push it into place. So my camera cable dropped out right behind my bumper here, and we're going to take the short adapter piece and we can go ahead and plug it in. Now again, if you'll notice, it's very similar to the monitor cable, but it has a different amount of pins inside. So we're going to again line up the notches and the arrows on our cables, and we can go ahead and press them in together. I'm going to take a little bit of electrical tape and wrap it up to help secure it and protect it. Now we're going to get this end of our cable to the inside of the car. Now I found a grommet underneath our vehicle here, just to the outside of our spare tire, right behind our axle. Now I'm going to move to the inside and make sure that there's nothing in the way so I can get through that grommet there. So we move to the inside, we can go ahead and pull our cover up where our spare tire access is, and we're going to need to start pulling out all the panels that are covering the floor. So if we start with this panel right here just beyond the threshold, so if we come to the side and we slightly lift up, we can start releasing the clips, moving our way towards the center. And we can set the panel aside. Now the grommet we found underneath the vehicle isn't quite a hard spot to reach because it's going to be underneath our back seats. But we did find a better location once we pop the threshold off here. If we pull this sticker off, we're going to see we're going to have a hole, and that hole is going to go directly underneath our vehicle. So I'm going to take my drill with my step bit and I'm going to enlarge the hole big enough so that my camera cable can go through. Now, it's never a good idea to leave bare metal exposed on your vehicle, so I'm going to come back with a little clear spray paint to help protect that hole that I just drilled. Now we can go ahead and reach underneath and start feeding our camera cable through the hole. We're going to go ahead and take our female cable, the one that's going to be 33 feet long. We can go ahead and attach the cable to the male end of our other cable coming off of our camera. And again, they're going to have a couple arrows on there so you can line it up correctly and put it in together. And we screw it in place, making sure it's locked in. Now again, I'm going to put a little bit of electrical tape around this connection to help keep it secure and keep any dirt and debris out. And they do provide us with this cover that I'm going to slip over before I put my electrical tape on. Now we're going to need to route this wire up towards the front as far as we can towards the other harness that we started with on our monitor. Now everybody's going to do it a little bit differently, so let me run my wire and then I'll show you how I ran it. Now I didn't want to leave my camera cable exposed to the sharp edges of the hole that I drilled, so I filled it in with some silicone and then I'm going to let it dry now. Now if you need some silicone, you can pick some up on our website using part number LT37467. I ran my camera cable up and through behind this panel here, going up to my headliner, and I started going across. Now I do want to mention you are going to have your cargo tie-downs to take off right here, as we can see on the passenger side, and you're going to need a T40 Torx bit to remove the hook, and then you can pull it all off. I ran my cable all along the headliner, and then once I got to my door, I pulled the weather stripping back and continued to go along the headliner here and started running it across, and then I did the same thing up front. I pulled the weather stripping down, went across, and then once I got to the center post here, I went down to meet up with my other wires at the bottom of my dash. So I came down, and here's the rest of where my cable came out. Now I want to mention that all the panels that I pulled off, they are just held in by clips, so you just want to be careful while you're pulling. Just gently pull and the clip should release. So at the end of our camera cable, we're going to need to find the other adapter harness that's going to fit this as well. It's going to look like this. It's going to have the camera cable end, and then we're going to have a red, yellow, and white connector. For now, we're going to go ahead and connect the camera cable side. We're going to line up the two arrows, put the connector together, and then we can secure it with the lock nut. And then I can slide the cover over. I'm going to come back with a little bit of electrical tape. Now, like I mentioned before, we're going to have a yellow, a white, and a red. Now the red is going to be for our power that we're going to be sending to our camera. So we're going to need to find the harness that has the black connector like this, and the end of it's going to have a black and a red wire. For now, we're just going to be paying attention to the black connector. We're going to go ahead and plug the black connector with the red one, and again, I'm going to take a little bit of electrical tape to secure the connection. Now our yellow connector looks like an RCA cable. We're going to find our monitor harness that we ran earlier, and we're going to have two connectors on them. One of them is going to say video in, and one of them is going to say camera. We're going to want to connect it to the camera input. We can go ahead and plug it in, and again secure it with some electrical tape. We should have 5 wires left. These 5 wires are the only other ones we're going to be using. We're not going to be using the other yellow connector or the white connector. So on one end of our monitor harness, we're going to have our filter fuse box attached with a red and a black wire coming out, as well as a green wire coming off the harness. The green wire we're going to need to tap into our reverse signal. Our red wire is going to be for our 12 volt power, but only when our key is in the on position. And our black wire is going to be our ground. Now coming off of the camera end, again, we're going to have a red wire that's going to be a 12 volt accessory power source, so only when the key is on, and our black wire is going to be for our ground as well. So since both of our black wires are going to be for our ground, I'm going to slip off the insulation that was on there. I'm actually going to strip back the end of my other ground wire so I have a decent amount just like this one. Now these wires are very thin, so that's why I'm stripping back as much as I can, because now I'm going to take both my black wires and I'm going to twist them together, and now I'm going to fold them in half so that it makes it a little bit thicker. Now, since we are going to need to ground this, I'm going to be crimping on a ring terminal, and if you don't have any of these, you can pick one up on our website using part number 44-5356A. I'm going to crimp it into place. Unfortunately, we have a factory ground right here, right below our harness. So I'm going to take this bolt out and secure my ground. Now I'm using a 10mm socket to remove that bolt. I'll go ahead and reinstall the bolt. Now our green wire, like I mentioned before, we're going to be tapping into our reverse signal. Now instead of running the wire all the way to the back, since we just came from there, we do have our wire harness here, which somewhere in here our reverse light bulb signal will be in here. So I'm going to start testing these and I'll let you know which wire it is. So we tested our wires and we came to find out that this lime green wire with no stripes, it's just a solid lime green wire. The vehicle in reverse, we get power, and then if we put it in park, we lose power. So this lime green wire right here, that's going to be our reverse signal. So I pulled my wire away from the harness a little bit, and I'm going to come to it and I'm going to snip it in half, and now I'm going to strip back both ends. Now I'm going to be using a heat shrink butt connector, and that's just going to give us a little bit more protection against corrosion or any kind of moisture buildup. I'm going to crimp it onto my reverse wire, and you want to be careful not to cut or to mash any of the other wires while you're doing this. So we have one end connected to our reverse wire. Now the other end, I'm going to take my green wire and I'm going to wrap it around the other end of my reverse signal wire, and then we'll put it into the other end of our butt connector. And we can crimp it into place. Quick tug, make sure everything's secure. Now I'm going to be using a heat gun to shrink down my connector. Just want to mention, if you're using an open flame, you want to be extra careful not to burn the wires or the connector itself. We should have our two red power wires left. Now I'm going to strip back a little bit more off of this one, just so I have a little bit more room to work with. I'm going to do the same thing I did with my ground wires. Since they're both going to a 12-volt power source, I'm going to tie them together and then fold the wire in half. I'm going to take another one of my blue heat shrink butt connectors, and I'm going to crimp it onto the end of my wire. Now we're going to have to find a 12-volt power source that's only on when our key is in the on position. Now we don't have a whole lot of room, so we are going to need to pick up some extra wire. I had some 16-gauge wire laying around, and if you need some, you can pick some up on our website using part number DW02359-1, and that's wire by the foot. So I'm going to take one end of my extra wire and I'm going to strip it back, and I'm going to crimp it onto the end of my two power wires. Now, in order to get our wire that we're going to need to get our 12-volt power source from, we're going to be tapping into the fuse panel underneath the hood. So to get through from the inside to the outside of underneath our hood, we're going to need to remove this panel. Now we're going to have 1, 2, 3 push pin fasteners that's holding it in place. Now you can use a flathead screwdriver or a trim panel tool to remove them. Now these clips, if you pull out the center section first, it'll release the clip, and then the rest of it will come out. Just like that. And we're going to set this panel aside. Now if we come to the firewall, we're going to notice a large grommet right here. Now if we can, we're going to grab it and break it loose, which will allow us access to the engine bay. Now to make sure that our wire doesn't get damaged, I'm going to take a razor knife and I'm going to cut a slit so that my wire can feed up into the grommet and pass through. I'm going to take my airline tube now and I'm going to pass it through. I'm going to push it through enough that I can grab it on the other side in the engine. Go ahead and take our power wire, start feeding it into our airline tube and secure it with some electrical tape. Now we can go into the hood and start pulling our airline tube through. We want to pull all the excess wire out and make sure that it doesn't get tangled up. Now I'm going to zip tie my power wire here to one of my factory wires. That way just to help keep it secure and keep it from falling down. we need to route our wire over to the passenger side where our fuse box is going to be. Our power wire is going to be tapping into a fuse that only gets power when our ignition is in the on position. So with an extra set of hands, we're going to start testing our fuses, and I'll let you know which one we're going to use. So if we come to the very front of our fuse panel where all our 15 amp fuses are, and towards the driver's side, if we go over to this 10 amp fuse here, this is going to be labeled for our rear camera. Now with the ignition on, we are receiving power here. And we'll go ahead and shut it off and make sure that we don't have power when the ignition is off. And as you can see, with the ignition off, we're not getting any kind of power source from this fuse, so this will be the fuse that we'll tap into. So I'm going to pull this fuse out just using a pair of needle nose pliers. Now that we know that that fuse gets power when the ignition is on, we're going to turn the ignition back on and figure out which side is getting power. With the ignition in the on position, one side that's going to be getting power is going to be our hot side, and the side that's not getting anything is going to be our cold side. So it looks like the side closest to the back of the vehicle is going to be our hot side. Now we're going to need to remember that. So here I have a fuse tap. Now we are going to need to get one of these in order for us to install our camera. Now in our fuse tap, if we're looking at it, the terminals closest to the prong sticking out is where we're going to put our factory fuse back in. Now the top fuse location, that's going to be for our accessories, so I'm going to go ahead and put another 10 amp fuse in there as well. Now the reason why we needed to find out the hot and cold side is because it determines how we're going to put our fuses in place. The easiest way to remember is you want the hot side to connect to the terminal that is farthest away from the wire. So we're going to want it on this terminal to be our hot side. Before we put our fuse tap in, I'm going to set it aside for now, and I'm going to estimate about how much wire I'm going to need. So then we can go ahead and cut it and strip back our end. And our fuse tap already has a butt connector installed, so we can go ahead and take our wire, insert it into the butt connector, and crimp it down. Now when we went to put our fuse tap in, we figured that we're not going to be able to clear this relay right here, so we're actually going to be using this fuse right above the rear camera, and that's going to be for our ignition. And I already tested it, and we know that it only gets power when the ignition is on, and the hot and cold side are the same as our rear camera. So I'm going to go ahead and put my fuse tap right here. I'm going to put it into place. Now, before we start tidying up our wires and putting everything back, I always recommend that you start your car and test the camera and make sure everything's working. And if we start our car and put it in reverse, we can see that the monitor and camera are both working. So with that working, we're going to go ahead and start tidying all our wires up and putting all the panels back in place. So we're going to start to zip tie up all our wires and clean everything up. Now all the excess wire that I had coming from the back that met up here, I'm actually going to bundle it together, and I'm going to lift up my carpet, and I'm going to put it underneath my carpet, underneath the floorboard. That way it's out of the way, and I don't have to worry about it interfering with my pedals or anything else. I'm going to put our weather stripping back, and just in general start tidying everything up. Now we're going to make sure that the wire is going through the slit on our grommet, and then we're going to put it back into position. Now once we get our grommet back in place, I'm going to seal up that cut that I made to put my wire in with that silicone I was using earlier. And put all our panels back, including the one underneath our dash. Now my OnStar plug and wires, I'm going to tuck up underneath my headliner. That way I don't have to worry about them hanging down and interfering with anything. Now you may have some things in the way underneath your headliner. You're just going to have to find a spot to tuck them up underneath and out of the way. Now we can take that cover that we took off in the beginning. We're going to slide it up around our headliner like that. Then we can take the bottom piece, making sure that we go to the inside of the outer top cover, and it'll lock into place. And then we can slide the cover over our mirror. And And we can put all the panels in the back. Finally, we can put our license plate back in place. And that'll finish up our look at the rear view safety G-Series backup camera, part number RVS-776718-DOS on our 2011 Chevrolet Traverse.